So, esteemed audience who's probably mostly listening, although even though you're listening, esteemed audience, you can still go to YouTube and hit subscribe. Why not? They can't see that you've got your Star Wars t-shirt on. And you had shown me your super sweet Lego Millennium Falcon a moment ago, which is awesome, and I'm deeply jealous of it. Was Star Wars a big influence, or were there some other science fiction? Where did you draw your science fiction influences from?
Sure. I mean, I think I drew them from lots of different places. Star Wars was huge. I don't know that Star Wars was necessarily huge in terms of, plot and character so much as world building, right? I mean, I learned so much growing up from watching those movies about how just one scene invokes a history that the rest of the movie doesn't even get into. I mean, this was the cool thing about the cantina scene in episode 4, right? Is that you walk into that cantina and you see all these people basically for half a second. And at some point you realize each of them has their own backstory, right? Each of them has their own investment in what's going on with the Empire and the rebels and all this stuff. Each of them has their own wants and needs, maybe their own starship, maybe they got a bounty on their head. And the idea of that sort of rich galaxy has always stuck with me. And so that's one of the things that I wanted to do with this book. But at the same time, like, that's a galaxy far, far away. This is actually set in our galaxy right here, right? Good old Milky Way. And so I drew on a lot of other things, like Star Trek and Stargate and all kinds of things where sort of humanity's stake, as we know it, becomes important, especially with the fragile planet that we're sitting on. And so that was a concern. And then, I have pirates, Guardians of the Galaxy. They're pretty cool. And I think as viewers and readers have grown up, we have an appreciation for a little smart aleckness, right, in our characters. And so I wanted this to be a band of misfits, right? The Goonies, I guess, of the interstellar scene. So, I mean, just so many influences. And those are just the movies, in terms of books. I grew up on Bradbury and Arthur C. Clarke and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's definitely some of that humor in there. I can't pull it off. I can't pull Douglas Adams off. I wouldn't even try. But there's some irreverence, right? And some parody and some satire and some good stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot. And that's one of the cool things about working in a genre, is being able to tap into all the things that you grew up with and that you loved, and say, all right, how do I put my own little twist on this? Like, how do I cobble together these bits and pieces, these sort of character archetypes that I love, and these sort of ancient mythological stories, which really go back to the Iliad and the Odyssey, like we were talking about earlier, but set in outer space. And how do I tell my own version of that story and then make it relevant for our 21st century position that we're in? And science fiction is so cool about that because it always uses the future, either near or far, to reflect on the present and even the past. And that sort of metaphorical relationship was one that I really enjoyed exploring.
I'm sure there's a special on the History Channel about how the Iliad was actually written by ancient aliens. So you mentioned the Grateful Dead T-shirt that the pirate's wearing. I assume that means you have listened to at least some Grateful Dead while you're doing the writing. Are you pro Grateful Dead, and so you empathize with the pirate clinging to the past, or are you anti Grateful Dead, and that's why the pirate's wearing it, and that makes you hate him more?
No. I'm definitely I'm definitely pro hang on to the past, if the past is useful to us, right? Especially when it comes to the artistic past. And he's got Pearl Jam T-shirts. I mean, he's got all kinds of stuff. He sort of runs the gamut. I don't know if there's any boy bands that he appreciates, but I know they talk about them at one point. And like his prized possession is David Bowie's Space Odyssey on vinyl, which turns out to be a key to getting some other people to help them. And so for me, I think nostalgia it's useful as a panacea, as a way to, sort of look back on the past and say, we didn't screw everything up, right? We at least did this. That was good, wasn't it? Even though sometimes we look back on it, we thought it was good, but it turns out it's really not. But I think for this character, Baz is his name, Bastian Black. I think it's a way to not lose sight of his humanity in the great big old universe that he's in. There's this scene from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I don't remember which of the 4 books in the trilogy, or 5 books in the trilogy it is, but it's where Zaphod Beeblebrox goes into this like machine, and it's going to show him just how important he is in the universe, right? And he steps inside this machine, and it shows this like this most minuscule little dot, right? In terms of the like great big huge void of the universe. And basically the point is, you are nothing, right? You are a dust mite, if that. And of course he steps out of it and he's like, oh, I didn't know I was that important, right? So it's all mindset, right? And so I think for him, for Baz, it's like, I'm going to hold on to the things that make us as a species really cool. And for him, that's Twinkies and old rock bands and really cool, Jordan shoes and whatever.
I do find that for middle grade, and maybe I'm deluding myself, but I'll ask you, and if you agree, then I'll assume that it's all good. But for the second Manaker, there is a technique to build suspense that I've borrowed, repurposed from the second season of Breaking Bad. And obviously it's redone in completely different terms. It's just I understand the principle of how that I understand that storytelling technique. It could also work here. But as I was doing it, it occurred to me, what the kids that are the ideal target audience for this probably haven't seen Breaking Bad. So even if an adult identified it, which they certainly will now that I'm on a podcast talking about it, I think I'd still be okay. Is that a valid viewpoint, you think, that you can repurpose some things from the past that younger readers won't be as familiar with? I think John David Anderson, he's brilliant. This is the first time I'm ever encountering this when maybe it's a trope thing.
I think so. I mean, for me, as trying to remember myself as a young reader, and I don't know if you were the same way, but I was invested in the story. Right, I was invested in character. I didn't really think so much about craft. I wasn't astute enough. And this is going to make my reader sound bad, but it's just about where your sort of focus lies, right? To step outside and ask myself, how is the author manipulating my emotions in this way, right? Or how did he make that cool narrative move there that allows me to all of a sudden become invested in this when before I wasn't? I didn't get to that point until I was probably in high school, like late high school. And that's when I started getting interested in those little moves that narratives make and the storytellers make. Up to that point, like I just wanted to go to that world in my head. And I just wanted to be that character. And sometimes when we sort of fall back on a trope or an archetype or something like that, I think that makes it easier for readers to identify, right? Because they can say, I've kind of seen this guy somewhere before, right? He's kind of Han Solo. He's kind of my dad. And he's kind of also my sarcastic uncle that we only invite over to the house once a year, right? Because we know he's going to say something wildly inappropriate. And if I merge all those three together and, give him these other three interests, like, yeah, that's him. Like, I know him. And so then you come with your own opinions and investment in that character. And then if that character does something then that goes against all of the tropes and the archetypes that you're used to, then that can also be kind of a revelation or a breath of fresh air, right? Because then you are surprised. You're like, oh, that's really cool. So I like to use them. I like to manipulate them. That's actually how I got my start as a writer. My first book that actually sold anything was Sidekicked, which was me sitting down in my chair saying, why can we name 500 superheroes, but we can only name 2 or 3 superhero sidekicks? Like, we have all these tropes and conventions of the superhero genre, and one of them is the sidekick. But at the same time, like, that's sort of amorphous. Like, unless you're talking about Robin, you don't really know what the conventions of a sidekick are. And so it's at the one time freeing, right? Because it's a space that can be explored. But at the other time, it's not so intimidating because you have all these other rules that you can choose to play by if you want to, or you can choose to flip on their head to get that reaction out of your reader. So, for example, in that book, I took the main character, Drew. We know he's a superhero. He's a superhero sidekick, but I gave him an incredibly lame power, right? He has extraordinary senses. He can hear, smell, and see things coming from a mile away. But when they get to him, he's completely powerless to stop them, right? It's lights out.
Daredevil's main thing?
Well, yeah, except for Daredevil kind of kicks butt. Like, he's learned to overcompensate or to compensate for his blindness, right? With extraordinary hearing. And, if you were to stick Drew and Daredevil next to each other, and then Drew maybe was like, hey, this guy's coming. And Daredevil's like, I saw him coming. He's like, are you going to do anything about it? Because it's got to be you. Because you know what Drew's going to do? He's going to play dead, pretty much. And then Daredevil's going to whip out those little sticky things. I don't know what they're called, and beat up the guy or whatnot.
Daredevil, I'm so glad you were here. This is perfect.
We make a good team.
I think that would be my role in a superhero universe. I could identify the danger. Oh, this looks like trouble over here. I'm going to go get dinner. When I come back, I expect you to take care of it.
You're just a very astute, innocent bystander, right? Not me. I'm the guy who gets crushed by the falling car. Hopefully saved by Spider-Man's web at the last second. But if not, it was a good life.
Well, maybe at least motivate him to be really angry and punch extra hard.
There you go. Everybody has a purpose.
Life well lived, a sacrifice that's worthy.
The unsung heroes of the superhero.
Peter Parker's eyes after I died. Well, you'd say it was all worth it.